The kimchi hit me across the face before I even set my fork down, cold and sour, my mother-in-law's hand still raised over the table, where she'd just announced she'd picked my kitchen's paint color. I wiped my cheek with my napkin and told her, calmly, that a gift didn't buy her a vote in my house. My name is Grace Merritt. I'm 34. For 8 years my family called $120,000 a gift, until they needed it to be a debt instead. Hit like if a gift in your family ever became a debt, and subscribe if you want to hear exactly how this ends. This is what happened next. $120,000, Judith said, setting her kimchi jar down on the table like a gavel. That's what bought this house you're standing in. I think that includes an opinion on the kitchen. I had learned, over 8 years, that Sunday dinners at my own table were never fully mine. Judith, my mother-in-law, arrived early, let herself in with the spare key my husband Nathan had given her back when we first bought the house. And by the time I came downstairs the pot roast was already in the oven, seasoned a way I wouldn't have chosen, in a pan that belonged to my kitchen, but always ended up feeling borrowed. Tonight, Judith had also brought a mason jar wrapped in a dish towel, carried in both hands like something ceremonial. I made this myself, she said, setting it on the counter. The real way, not the store kind. I had told her, gently, twice, that I didn't care for it. Too much red pepper, not the way I'd grown up eating it at all. Judith had nodded both times and brought it again anyway. We were 3 bites into dinner when Judith set her fork down with the particular calm she reserved for announcements. I spoke to Ron this week, she said, meaning the contractor. About the kitchen, he's going to start the repaint next month. That warm gray I showed you. I looked up. We hadn't decided on a color yet, Judith. I decided. Judith said it simply, the way she said everything that wasn't actually simple at all. I paid for this house, you know. $120,000, she repeated, like a number that had earned the right to be said at every dinner for the rest of time. I think that includes the kitchen. I think that earns me an opinion on the color. Nathan's fork hovered over his plate. He didn't look at his mother. He didn't look at me either. You didn't pay for the kitchen, I said, and kept my voice level, the same voice I used at work delivering numbers people didn't want to hear. You gave us a down payment 8 years ago. That's not the same as owning a vote on paint colors today. The Kwan's daughter-in-law doesn't argue about paint, Judith said. She just says thank you. I have said thank you. I say it every year. I set my own fork down now too. But a leaf's and a lint the same thing, Judith. You don't get to keep collecting on it. The table went silent in the particular way a room goes silent right before something happens that everyone will remember differently later. Judith's hand moved before I had time to name what was happening. She reached into the mason jar, bare-handed, and the slap of cold, sour cabbage across my cheek and jaw came with a sound sharper than it should have, red pepper paste sliding warm and stinging into the corner of my eye and down into my collar. That, Judith said, quiet, even the same tone she used for the kitchen announcement, is for acting like 8 years of a piece of paper means more than everything I gave this family. Nobody moved. I counted 3 full seconds without meaning to, an old habit from work, always counting the silence before numbers nobody wanted to hear landed. If you've ever sat at a table where the wrong thing was said calmly, you know it's worse than shouting. Shouting ends, calm just waits for you to react first. Nathan's hands went to the edge of the table. He gripped it. His eyes went to his mother first, not to me, checking whether she was all right, the way he always checked on her first. I wiped my face with my own napkin slowly. Cabbage, garlic, the burn settling into the corner of my eye. I folded the napkin in half, then in half again, the way I filed everything I needed to remember exactly where I'd left it. You made good kimchi, Judith, I said. My voice didn't shake. I mean that. It's good kimchi. Judith blinked, thrown for the first time all night. Grace, Nathan started, and even that much took him a full second too long. Don't, I said, not raised, not sharp. Not tonight. I stood, careful, unhurried, and did not look at either of them again on my way out of the room. In the bathroom mirror, my reflection looked almost ordinary, if you didn't count the stain spreading across white cotton at my collar, or the new and particular stillness behind my own eyes. I ran the water. I did not cry. I thought instead about the ribbon of a number Judith had said out loud at every family gathering for 8 years, $120,000, like a debt with compounding interest that never once appeared on paper anywhere Judith could point to. Except it did appear on paper. I knew that better than almost anyone in the state of Ohio, because I'd spent 11 years processing exactly that kind of paper for a living. Later, after Judith had gone home still holding the empty mason jar, and Nathan had gone quiet in the particular way he mistook for making amends, I sat alone in the spare room and opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. The one Nathan had never once needed to look through in 8 years of marriage. I didn't take anything out, not yet. I just laid my hand flat on top of the folder with my attorney's letterhead still visible through the tab and left it exactly where it was. Upstairs, the shower ran long enough to wash the last of the pepper paste out of my hair, and long enough, too, for me to decide, quietly, standing under water gone lukewarm, that the next time anyone in this family said the words I gave you, I was going to know exactly what I'd actually been given. And exactly what I hadn't. Stay with me, because the next thing I found in that drawer is the reason none of what came after went the way Judith expected. The jacket had been hanging in the hall closet for 3 days before I noticed the folded paper sticking out of the inside pocket, an appointment receipt from a law office I didn't recognize, dated the week before the kimchi jar. I found the loan paperwork first, not the receipt, spread across the kitchen counter on a Tuesday morning when Nathan thought I'd already left for work. A refinance application. Our names, our current rate, a lender I didn't recognize. When were you going to tell me about this? I asked. I was going to bring it up this weekend. Nathan didn't look up from the papers, sliding 2 of them under a third the way a man slides a hand over something on a table. He doesn't want examined too closely. Rates dropped. It's routine. We'd save $400 a month. Routine refinances don't usually come with an already filled-out application, I said. Who else has seen this? No one, Nathan said. The pause before it, small, almost nothing, lasted just long enough for me to notice it, the way I noticed a signature date that didn't match a notary stamp, the kind of half-second gap my whole career had trained me to hear. Judith already knew we were refinancing, I said. It wasn't a question. She mentioned it Sunday, before you told me anything about it. She asks about the house sometimes. It doesn't mean anything. I let it go out loud. I did not let it go anywhere else. That night, after Nathan had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with the loan application spread in front of me the way I spread other people's files at work, checking dates, checking who signed what and when. The application had been started 19 days ago. Judith had mentioned the refinance at Sunday dinner, 2 days ago, in a tone that assumed I already knew every detail, the way you'd discuss a plan already agreed on by everyone in the room, but one person. I had been in that room. I had not agreed to anything. I found the receipt Wednesday morning, doing laundry, a folded slip from a law office 2 towns over, a consultation fee, dated 10 days ago. Nathan's name on the client line. No mention of who else attended. I didn't confront him with it. Not yet. I photographed it with my phone, folded it back exactly the way I'd found it, and returned the jacket to the closet. That night, lying beside him in the dark, I asked one more question, quiet, almost idle. 21 days to closing, the paperwork said. Does that seem fast to you? Nathan didn't answer right away. In the dark, I couldn't see his face. I didn't need to. 8 years untouched, and the folder still smelled faintly of the attorney's office where I'd signed it, the same smell I associated now, oddly, with the particular quiet of the spare room at 11 at night. I remembered the closing 8 years ago better than I'd expected to, once I started trying. Judith and her late husband, still living then, had sat across the table beaming, proud, generous, while the loan officer, not me, a different bank back then, slid a single-page document across for Judith's signature. Gift letter, it was titled plainly, the way lending documents rarely bothered to disguise anything. I remembered the loan officer's exact phrasing, delivered the way people deliver something they say 50 times a year and mean every time. This just confirms the money's a gift, not a loan, and that you're not expecting anything back for it. Ownership, repayment, any of that. Just a formality, but we need it on file. Judith had signed without reading past the first line. I remembered that specifically, because I remembered thinking, even then, that I hoped somebody in this family would remember that later. I waited until Nathan was asleep, then I went to the spare room, closed the door without letting it latch, and opened the drawer. The gift letter was exactly where I'd left it, in a folder I hadn't touched since the day I'd filed it away, some habit from work I'd never unlearned. Keep everything, forget nothing, you never know which document will matter in 10 years. I read it slowly, twice, the way I read every document before deciding whether to use it. It said the undersigned donor certified that the funds gifted were not, in any manner, expected to be repaid, and conferred no ownership interest in the property to the donor. Judith's signature at the bottom, looping and confident, from a version of herself 8 years younger, before $120,000 had turned, in her own mind, into something owed rather than something given. I didn't call my attorney that night. I made a photocopy on the little printer in the corner of the room, put the original back exactly where it had been, angled the same 3 degrees off center it always sat at, and closed the drawer. The next morning, I considered showing Nathan the receipt from his jacket, the law office consultation, and decided against it. Not yet. Some part of me wanted to see how long he'd let the silence run before he told me himself. He didn't tell me that week, or the next. I slid the photocopy into a fresh folder of its own, one Nathan had never seen, and wrote 2 words on a sticky note across the front before closing it in a desk drawer at my office instead of at home, in case. I want you to understand what that folder meant, because everything Judith did for the next 2 months, she did without knowing it already existed. She's never liked real kimchi, Judith said, loud enough to be sure I could hear every word. Never has, never really tried to be part of this family, if I'm honest. It was Aunt Carol's 70th birthday, and 20-some relatives filled 2 folding tables in her backyard. Carol, Nathan's aunt, and the closest thing the family had to a neutral party, paper plates and citronella candles, and Judith had positioned herself 2 seats from me. Close enough to be overheard, far enough to claim she wasn't speaking to me directly at all. You know what I gave that girl, Judith said to Carol. $120,000 toward that house. Not a loan, a gift. And I still drive over with dinner twice a month, because God forbid she cooks something her husband actually wants. Carol made a noncommittal sound over her potato salad. Meanwhile, Judith went on, look at the Petrosian boy's wife, calls her mother-in-law every single day, sends her flowers on her own birthday, if you can believe it, takes her to appointments. She let the comparison sit a moment before delivering the rest. And what do I get? A daughter-in-law who won't even eat what I bring her. I kept my fork moving. If you've ever been compared out loud to a version of yourself that doesn't exist, you know exactly how small that table felt. She's never liked real kimchi, Judith said, turning enough now to be certain I heard it directly. Never has. Never really tried to be part of this family. If I'm honest, I make it with my own 2 hands, and she lets it sit in that freezer like it's nothing. Carol glanced at me, then back at Judith, something crossing her face that stopped short of agreement. Judith, I don't think anybody's counting who calls who. I'm not counting, Judith said, in the exact tone of a woman who had been counting for 8 years. I'm just saying, some families understand what's owed. Ours doesn't seem to. I set my fork down, unhurried. I think what's owed, I said mild enough that it took a second to register as a response at all, usually comes with a number attached to it. The visits and the kimchi were never owed to anyone, Judith. You chose to bring them. I picked my fork back up. I'm always grateful for the gift. I've just never agreed it came with a bill. Nobody at the table spoke for a moment. Carol's eyes moved between the 2 of us once, twice, and settled back on her plate. But something in her posture had shifted, small, almost nothing, the first crack of a relative deciding to watch rather than agree. On the drive home, Nathan finally spoke. You didn't have to say that in front of Carol. She said, I don't belong in this family. In front of Carol, first. He didn't answer that. Later that night, scrolling absently through my phone, I realized something I should have noticed years ago. There was a family group chat, cousins, aunts, Judith, planning holidays and birthdays. It seemed decisions that concerned me without ever including me. I had never been added to it. I wasn't sure, until that night, that it had ever occurred to me to ask why. I didn't mention the group chat to Nathan. I filed it away instead, the way I filed everything now, in the growing folder of decisions this family had made, quietly without me. My mother used to say it the same way every time, handing over rent money or a car payment. You'll remember who was there for you. I was 12 the first time I understood that wasn't generosity, it was a ledger. I had grown up watching my own mother use money the way Judith did, a gift first, gratitude expected in return forever, any hesitation treated as betrayal. I'd promised myself, marrying Nathan, that my own house would never run on that current. Watching it take root anyway, 8 years in, felt less like a surprise than like a door I thought I'd locked coming open from the other side. I hadn't told Nathan any of this. I wasn't sure some nights that he would have understood why it mattered so much, or why I'd waited this long to say the word no and mean it. The birthday party fallout reached Judith secondhand within 2 days, filtered through whichever cousin had repeated it fastest. The messages that followed weren't frantic. They were worse than frantic, they were composed, formal, each one landing like a memo. I think we should discuss what's owed before this goes further. The first one read, I raised my son to understand family obligation. I'm surprised you don't share that, said the second. And then, hours later, a deadline, I would like an answer by the weekend. I read each one twice, I didn't answer any of them. I called my attorney's office Thursday afternoon, on my lunch break, and asked, carefully, hypothetically, what it would take to get a certified copy of an 8-year-old signed document pulled from a closed loan file. Depends what it's for, the paralegal said. Court, or just for your own records? I looked out the window of my office at the parking lot, at nothing in particular. I'm not sure yet, I said. Just tell me how fast it can be done, if I needed it done fast. That evening, I reread Judith's last text one more time, the word owed sitting in the middle of it like something left out on a counter for someone else to clean up. Then I opened my calendar and counted the days left until the closing. 10. I was only looking for space for a bag of frozen peas when I found them, 9 mason jars, dated in Judith's handwriting, stacked at the back of the freezer like something buried on purpose. The certified copy arrived by courier on a Tuesday, a clean, notarized reproduction of the gift letter, Judith's 8-year-old's signature reproduced in crisp black and white, stamped and dated on this side by someone with no stake in any of it. I held it at my kitchen table for a long moment before sliding it into the folder marked in case. It didn't feel like winning, it felt like finally holding a fact steady enough to stand on. I waited until the certified copy was locked in my desk drawer at the office before I brought up the receipt at all. That evening, I set the folded slip from the law office down on the kitchen counter between us. "You've had 3 weeks to tell me about this," I said. "I gave you 3 weeks." Nathan didn't reach for it. "It was just a conversation," he said. "I didn't sign anything. I didn't think it was a big deal." "You met a lawyer with your mother about our house and didn't tell your wife. That's not a small thing, Nathan, no matter how you explain it." I was trying to keep the peace. He said it like an apology, though it wasn't one. I didn't want a whole fight before I even knew if it was something worth fighting about. "You already knew," I said. "That's why you didn't tell me." He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again it came out lower, less rehearsed. "She told me it was just in case, a formality, in case something happened to her before the loan was paid off. I wanted that to be true." It was easier than the alternative. He looked at me for the first time since I'd set the receipt down. "I'm not saying that to defend it. I know how it sounds. I just didn't want to be the son who thought the worst of his own mother." "I'm not asking you to think the worst of her, Nathan. I'm asking you to tell me the truth even when it's inconvenient." I picked the receipt back up, folded along the crease it had always had, and put it back in my bag. Keeping the peace isn't the same as keeping me informed. "You've been picking a side for weeks. You just never had to say it out loud, because believing her was easier than doubting her." He didn't have an answer for that. He said he'd handle it going forward. He did not handle it. The refinance kept moving exactly as it had before. I hadn't gone looking for the jars. I'd been digging for freezer space, moving a bag of chicken breasts aside, when my hand hit glass, then more glass, then a small, cold, unmistakable wall of mason jars pushed to the back. 9 of them, each one labeled in Judith's looping handwriting, a date on masking tape across the lid, going back nearly 2 years, roughly to the point where I had stopped simply enduring the kimchi and started telling Judith, plainly, that I didn't want it. Before that, I'd eaten it without complaint, or given it away, or found some quiet way not to keep it around at all. The freezer had only started filling once my note had an actual date attached to it, and Judith had never once, not a single time, treated that no as final. February. April. The one from Aunt Carol's birthday 2 months ago, still sealed. I stood there a long moment in the cold air rolling out of the freezer, and then, instead of throwing anything away, I took out my phone and photographed all 9 jars, dates visible, in a single frame. I didn't tell Nathan about the jars. I didn't need to yet. I saved the photo in the same folder as the certified gift letter, 2 kinds of evidence of the exact same pattern, one about money, one about a jar of cabbage nobody had ever actually been allowed to refuse. 7 days to closing. I closed the freezer door, and for the first time since Judith's hand had come across the table with a fistful of her own kimchi, I felt something other than dread when I thought about the appointment ahead of me. It wasn't triumph. It was closer to relief, the particular relief of finally having the whole shape of a thing in your hands instead of just the weight of it. Stay with me, because Judith vowed to find out how little of this was still hers to control. "We're so grateful for what Judith's doing for you too," Aunt Linda said, passing the cranberry sauce, in the exact tone people use for something they believe is already settled. It was Thanksgiving, and the table was full, more relatives than Sunday dinner ever gathered. I understood within the first 10 minutes that something had shifted in the room. Since Aunt Carol's birthday, people kept thanking Judith. People kept looking at me with a particular, careful warmth, the warmth reserved for someone who has finally come around to doing the right thing. "We heard you're adding Judith to the deed," Linda said, Nathan's cousin and the loudest voice in every group chat she'd ever been part of, beaming at me directly this time. "That's a lovely thing to do for her. After everything." I set my water glass down with care. "We haven't discussed that at all," I said. Linda's smile faltered, uncertain now whether she'd said something wrong or something true. Across the table, Judith didn't look up from her plate. I found Nathan alone by the drink cooler on the back porch. "Everyone at that table thinks it's decided, Nathan. Where did they get that?" "I don't know," he said, which I was fairly sure was a lie, or close enough to one that the difference didn't matter anymore. I didn't want to make it a whole thing at Thanksgiving. "You never want to make it a whole thing anywhere," I said. "That's kind of the problem." He didn't have an answer for that one either. He never did. I excused myself to the kitchen alone, needing 5 minutes away from the table, and it was there that Aunt Carol found me, drying a serving spoon with a dish towel, unhurried. "I'm in the family chat," Carol said, without preamble. "Have been for years." "You're not," I noticed. "I don't know why nobody ever fixed that." She set the spoon down and held out her phone. "I think you should see this before tomorrow." It was the thread from a week ago, time-stamped, unmistakable. Judith had written to the group 2 days after the birthday party, days before she had ever raised the subject of the deed with me directly at all. "Grace and Nathan have agreed to add me to the house. Once the refinance goes through," it read. "It's the least they can do." I read it twice. She hadn't asked either of us yet when she wrote this. "I know," Carol said. "I didn't say anything at the time. I should have." She didn't apologize further than that. She just forwarded the whole thread to my phone, screenshots, timestamps intact, and went back to drying dishes like she hadn't just handed over the one thing I couldn't have gotten for myself. 3 days to closing. I stood in Carol's kitchen with my phone in my hand, and for the first time all season, I had everything: the letter, the freezer, and now the proof that the promise everyone at that table believed in had never actually existed before Judith decided it should. The clerk didn't think twice before answering. Judith had called that desk often enough, and with enough certainty in her voice, that the clerk had long since assumed she was simply part of the file, and I was standing close enough to the counter to hear both sides of it. I had come in person that Thursday to drop off my own certified copy and confirm it had been logged before tomorrow's signing. Standing at the counter while the clerk pulled the file, the desk phone rang mid-conversation. The clerk answered, recognized the voice immediately, said, "Oh hi, Mrs. Merritt," and read the closing document summary straight down the list without a second thought. 2 names, no amendment, no addition anywhere in the file. Because Judith had spent weeks calling that office, just confirming details until nobody there thought to ask why a mother-in-law needed to confirm anything at all. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I watched the clerk's easy, unbothered face and understood exactly how Judith had gotten this far on nothing but a confident tone of voice. My own phone buzzed in my coat pocket before I'd even reached the parking lot. In the 40 minutes between hanging up with the title company and turning into that same parking lot, Judith called my phone 30 times, not spaced evenly, not building slowly, just 30 calls back to back, the phone barely finishing one ring cycle before the next one started. I sat in my car and watched the calls stack up on the screen, without answering a single one. I didn't need to. The rhythm told me everything. This wasn't a woman who wanted an explanation anymore. This was a woman who had just discovered, in real time, that the story she'd told an entire family for more than a week had never been true, and she was running out of road to make it true before tomorrow. If you've ever watched someone realize, in real time, that their own story is collapsing, you know that sound even through a voicemail. It isn't anger at first, it's panic wearing anger's clothes. The first voicemail was almost cheerful, testing the water. By the 9th, her voice had an edge. By the 20th, there weren't words in them anymore, just the sound of someone driving too fast while trying to talk at the same time. The 30th call cut off mid-ring. I looked up and understood why. A familiar car was pulling into the same lot, one day early, for an appointment that was never supposed to include either of us yet. Judith didn't get out right away. Nathan's car pulled in 2 minutes later, and through my windshield I watched him walk to his mother's car, instead of to mine, leaning down at her window, talking low, his hands doing the same placating motion I had watched him make for 8 years. I didn't go over. I didn't need to hear the words to know the shape of them. Not here, not yet. Let me handle it. He had said some version of that sentence to me a dozen times this season. He had never once, not a single time, followed through on it. I started my car and pulled out of the lot, without either of them noticing. Tomorrow was the real appointment. I intended to be the only one in that room who wasn't surprised by anything that happened in it. Stay with me, because tomorrow is the day Judith's own signature finally caught up with her. The closing attorney had barely finished explaining the disbursement schedule when Judith set her purse on the table and said, "Before we sign anything, I'd like my name added to the new deed. I believe that was already arranged." The title company's conference room held 5 people, the closing attorney, a notary, Nathan, Judith, and me. Judith had dressed for it the way she dressed for church, composed, certain, a woman who believed she had already won this weeks ago, and was only here to collect the paperwork that proved it. "I believe that was already arranged," she said again, when no one answered right away, looking at Nathan. Nathan looked at the table. The attorney glanced between them, professionally neutral. "I don't have any documentation reflecting that, Mrs. Merritt. Is there something you'd like to submit?" "My son can confirm it," Judith said. "Nathan." Everyone looked at him, he didn't speak. I reached into my bag and set a single certified page on the table, sliding it toward the attorney rather than toward Judith. "There's a document already on file from the original loan," I said. "I'd like it entered into the closing record, if that's all right." The attorney read it, then read it again, then looked up. "This is a standard federal gift letter," he said, "for the room's benefit as much as anyone's. Executed at the original closing 8 years ago." He read the operative line aloud, plainly, the way documents are always more devastating read aloud than summarized. "The undersigned donor certifies that the funds gifted are not, in any manner, expected to be repaid, and confer no ownership interest in the property to the donor." He turned the page toward Judith. "Is this your signature?" Judith looked at it for a long moment. I watched her reach, instinctively, for her purse, as if there might be some other document inside it that could undo the one already on the table. There wasn't. Her hand came back empty. "I signed a lot of paperwork that day," Judith said. "I don't remember every line." "You don't have to remember it," I said, quiet, not unkind. "It's still true either way." "After everything I'm owed," Judith said, and for the first time all season her voice wavered, not with anger, with something closer to the ground going out from under her. "I've fed this family for 8 years, twice a month, with my own hands." I didn't raise my voice either. The document had already done its work. The room had already seen it. This wasn't about winning anymore. I turned my phone around instead. 9 jars filled the screen, each one dated in Judith's own handwriting. "That's exactly the point," I said. "You keep calling it giving, even after I said no. You did it with the kimchi. You did it with this house. You decide what someone owes you first, and only afterward pretend they agreed. I let the phone sit there a moment before turning it face down. The letter is why you lose the deed. This is just so you understand why I stopped explaining myself to you a long time ago. Judith had no answer to that. For the first time in the entire season, she was the one who said nothing at all. It was Nathan who finally spoke, quiet, and not to me. You told me it was already settled with her, he said to his mother. It wasn't, was it? Judith didn't answer that either. For a moment she wasn't looking at the document at all or at me. She was looking at her son, at the particular way he'd said her name instead of Mom, the way a stranger might, and something in her own face changed that had nothing to do with the deed. It was the first time all season she looked like a woman who understood exactly what she'd spent 8 years trading away, and it wasn't a house. If you've ever watched someone finally understand what they actually lost, you know it doesn't look like anger either, it looks like stillness. The attorney cleared his throat gently and asked if everyone was ready to proceed with the documents as prepared. I signed my name where it needed to go. It was the only signature in the room that afternoon that surprised no one. The envelope arrived by mail, no note inside, just the spare house key, the one Judith had carried for 8 years, returned without a word. 2 weeks after the closing, the house felt different in a way I couldn't have described to anyone who hadn't lived inside the 8 years before it. No unannounced visits. No rearranged pantry. The kitchen stayed the color it had always been, because nobody repainted it, and nobody asked to. Nathan had started, awkwardly, in small ways, doing the thing I had asked him to do for years without ever managing it. He called his mother himself now, instead of letting her calls simply arrive and be endured. He said no to her, once, about a Sunday dinner neither of us had energy for, and did not apologize for it afterward. Judith still called, Sundays mostly, and Nathan still answered. But the calls were shorter now, and she never once asked to come by. I understood, without being told, that Judith hadn't forgiven anything. She had simply run out of paperwork to stand on. It wasn't a repaired relationship. It wasn't even close to one yet, but it was, for first time, an honest one. I drove out to Aunt Carol's the following Saturday, unannounced myself for once, and found her on the porch shelling peas into a bowl. I wanted to thank you, I said, for the chat, for all of it. Carol didn't look up from the peas right away. I didn't do anything, she said. I just didn't pretend I hadn't seen it. She glanced up then, something warm and a little tired in her face. That's usually the whole job, you know. Most people manage to convince themselves they didn't see what they saw. I just got tired of doing that. That Sunday, for the first time in longer than I could remember, I bought a head of Napa cabbage at the grocery store, on my own, for no reason except that I wanted to find out, finally, whether I actually liked kimchi or had simply never once been given the choice. I cleared the freezer that afternoon too, all 9 jars, dated in handwriting that wasn't mine, gone into the trash without ceremony, without anger, just space made for whatever I decided to put there instead. If you've ever spent years accepting what you never wanted because saying no felt bigger than the refusal itself, this part is for you. Nothing in that family was ever free. Not the money, not the kimchi. It just took me 8 years to ask what the price actually was. This is my story. Thank you for listening to it.